The crimson sky of Valthera split open with another lightning strike, illuminating the crumbling research facility perched on the cliff's edge. Captain Elias Reeve gripped the controls of the evacuation shuttle as it descended through the toxic atmosphere. His jaw clenched against the turbulence that threatened to tear them apart. 30 minutes until the continental shelf collapses, his co-pilot warned through the comm. We need to be gone in 20. Elias had run 73 extractions in his career. This was supposed to be number 74. Quick, clean, by the book. Get in, grab the scientist, get out. The planet was dying, had been for months, and Command had finally authorized the evacuation of the last research outpost. Most personnel had left weeks ago. Only the stubborn ones remained. The shuttle's landing gear screeched against the unstable ground. Through the viewport, Elias could see the facility's lights flickering, the structure groaning under the weight of Valthera's death throes. He grabbed his respirator and emergency kit, making his way to the airlock. Inside the facility, emergency lights cast everything in an eerie red glow. The air tasted metallic even through his mask, and the floor vibrated constantly from seismic activity. Elias moved quickly through the corridors. Following the tracking signal to the main laboratory, he found her there, surrounded by holographic displays and data terminals, her dark hair pulled back in a messy knot, fingers dancing across controls with frantic precision. Dr. Isla Vance didn't even look up when he entered. You have to leave. Now. His voice was harder than he intended. 5 more minutes. She replied, not breaking her concentration. I'm almost done mapping the final sequence. Elias glanced at the displays. Complex molecular structures, planetary core readings, things far beyond his expertise. The continent is about to break apart. Those 5 minutes will kill us both. Finally, Isla turned to face him. Her eyes were a striking amber color, intense and unwavering. Do you know what's happening here? This planet isn't just dying, it's transforming. The same process is beginning on 14 other worlds in this sector. If I can document how it starts, how it spreads, we can predict it. Save billions. Not if you're dead. Not if this data is lost. She countered, turning back to her work. Everything I've spent 3 years collecting is here. The atmospheric changes, the core mutations, the biological adaptations. This facility's servers are failing. I need to complete the backup transfer. The building shuddered violently. Somewhere above them, Elias heard the groan of metal tearing. He checked his chronometer. 18 minutes left. His orders were clear. Extract the asset. By force if necessary. He watched Isla work, her hands steady despite the chaos around them, her face set with absolute determination. There was something magnetic about her focus, her complete disregard for her own safety in pursuit of something greater. How long? He asked quietly. To do it right? For hours. You have 15 minutes. Elias moved to the terminal beside Isla, pulling off his gloves. Show me what you need. She looked at him with surprise, then something that might have been gratitude. The primary data cores are in subsection 7. I need them physically extracted and brought here while I compress the atmospheric readings. Point me there. Isla quickly pulled up a facility map, her fingers brushing against his as she highlighted the route. Even through the chaos, he felt the unexpected warmth of that contact. Down this corridor, through the storage bay, 3rd door on the left. The cores are about the size of your fist, marked with red tags. Elias ran. The facility was tearing itself apart around him, ceiling panels falling, walls cracking, the acrid smell of burning circuits filling the air. He reached subsection 7 just as another quake hit, throwing him against the wall. The room was a disaster, equipment strewn everywhere, but he spotted the cores in their protective housing. He grabbed all 4, tucking them into his pack, when the floor suddenly tilted. Through the viewport, he watched in horror as a massive fissure opened across the landscape, swallowing entire sections of the cliff face. The facility groaned, leaning precariously. Back in the lab, Isla was working with even more intensity. Elias slammed the cores onto her desk. We're out of time. I need to initialize these first. The building is literally falling into a chasm. She looked at him, and for the first time, he saw fear flicker across her features. But she didn't move. If we leave now, everything is lost. 3 years of work, the only hope of predicting this phenomenon, will mean nothing if we're crushed. Their faces were inches apart now, both breathing hard. The air between them crackled with more than just urgency. Isla's hand gripped his arm, her voice dropping to something almost pleading. Please, please help me finish this. Elias had spent his career following orders, maintaining discipline, keeping emotional distance from those he rescued. But looking into Isla's eyes, seeing the passion and desperation there, he felt something shift inside him. Tell me what to do, he said. For the next 10 minutes, they worked in perfect synchronization. Isla called out instructions while initializing the data cores, and Elias moved through the facility like a man possessed, retrieving backup drives, securing critical samples, even physically disconnecting servers that couldn't be left behind. The building screamed around them, sections collapsing, the floor tilting at increasingly dangerous angles. When Isla finally inserted the last core into her portable case, the relief on her face was palpable. But it lasted only a second before the lights died completely. Emergency power kicked in, bathing everything in dim red. Elias grabbed his comm shuttle report. Static. Then his co-pilot's panicked voice. Captain, the landing pad is compromised. We had to relocate to the north platform. It's the only stable ground left. Elias pulled up his map. The north platform was on the opposite side of the facility, through sections that were already showing structural failure. He looked at Isla. At the data case, she clutched like it held the secrets of the universe. Maybe it did. There's a service tunnel, Isla said, pointing to the map. It runs beneath the main structure. It'll take longer, but another massive quake cut her off. The floor beneath them cracked, a fissure running up the wall. Through the window, Elias watched as the eastern wing of the facility simply broke away, tumbling into the chasm below. Run, he commanded, grabbing her hand. The service tunnel was never meant for rapid evacuation. It was narrow, dark, and quickly filling with toxic fumes as Valthera's atmosphere breached the failing ventilation systems. Elias led the way, his helmet light cutting through the darkness, Isla close behind him. Watch the steam vents, she warned, pointing to ruptures in the pipes overhead. The coolant system is failing. If those burst, I know, Elias interrupted. He'd seen coolant burns before. They weren't pretty. They moved as quickly as the treacherous conditions allowed. The tunnel floor was uneven, littered with debris from the constant quakes. Twice, Elias had to catch Isla when she stumbled, his hands lingering perhaps a moment longer than necessary on her waist, her arms. You didn't have to stay, Isla said quietly as they navigated around a collapsed section. You could have forced me onto the shuttle hours ago. Would you have gone? No. Then it would have been a waste of time. He helped her over a pile of rubble, their bodies pressed close in the confined space. Besides, maybe you're right. Maybe this data is worth the risk. You don't believe that. Elias paused, turning to face her in the dim light. I believe you believe it. That's enough. Something passed between them in that moment. An understanding, a connection forged in crisis. Isla's hand found his cheek, her touch gentle despite their dire circumstances. Why did you really stay? Before he could answer, a deafening crack echoed through the tunnel. The ceiling above them bulged, then split. Elias grabbed Isla and dove forward just as tons of rock and metal crashed down where they'd been standing. They landed hard, Elias instinctively curling around Isla to protect her. For a moment, they lay there in the darkness, hearts pounding, breathing hard. When they finally pulled apart, their faces were so close Elias could feel her breath on his lips. Thank you, Isla whispered. His hand was still on her back, her fingers clutching his jacket. The rational part of his brain screamed that they needed to keep moving, that every second counted. But another part, a part he'd kept locked away for too long, wanted nothing more than to close that final distance between them that a distant rumble reminded him where they were. Come on, he said, his voice rougher than before. We're not out of this yet. They pressed forward, the tunnel growing more unstable with each passing minute. Emergency lights flickered and died, leaving only their helmet lamps. The air grew thicker, harder to breathe, even through their respirators. There, Isla pointed ahead, the access hatch to the north platform. But as they approached, Elias's heart sank. The hatch was sealed, and the control panel beside it was dead, fried by some power surge. He tried the manual override, but the wheel wouldn't budge. Fused shut, he muttered, examining the seal. The heat from the core instability must have welded it. Islam moved beside him, running her hands over the hatch, assessing. Her shoulder pressed against his as she worked, and even through their protective gear, Elias was acutely aware of her presence, her warmth, her determination. The ventilation shaft, she said suddenly. It connects to the platform maintenance room. We can go through there. Elias looked where she pointed. The shaft was barely wide enough for one person, and it angled sharply upward. That's a 30-foot climb and zero visibility through a space that could collapse any second. You have a better idea? He didn't. Isla insisted on going first. I know the facility layout, she argued. If there are any branch shafts, I'll know which one to take. Elias wanted to protest, every instinct screaming to keep her behind him where he could protect her, but she was already hauling herself into the opening before he could stop her. He followed, the metal walls of the shaft pressing in from all sides. It was slow, exhausting work. The shaft was slick with condensation, and handholds were scarce. Below them, they could hear the facility continuing its death throes, groaning metal, shattering glass, the distant roar of sections collapsing into the chasm. Talk to me, Elias called up. Tell me about this research. Make me understand why it matters so much. Isla's voice echoed down, strained from exertion. You know how stars die? How they go through predictable stages before they collapse or explode? Vaguely. Planets are the same. We just never knew it because we'd never witnessed it before. Valthera is teaching us that worlds have lifespans, cycles. And some cycles can be interrupted, changed. She paused, breathing hard. If we can understand the markers, the early warning signs, we could evacuate entire civilizations years in advance. Save countless lives. And that's worth dying for. Isn't saving lives worth dying for? Isn't that why you do what you do? Elias had no answer to that. They climbed in silence for a while. The only sounds their labored breathing and the scrape of their boots against metal. Then Isla's voice came again, softer this time. I'm sorry I put you in this position. I know I'm being selfish. You're being brave, Elias corrected. Stupid maybe, but brave. There's a difference. Sometimes. Above him, Isla laughed. A real laugh. Warm and genuine despite their circumstances. You're not what I expected from a military extraction specialist. What did you expect? Someone more rigid, more by the book. Someone who would have just hauled me out of here in restraints. I considered it, Elias admitted. For about 30 seconds. What changed your mind? He thought about how to answer that. About the moment he'd seen her in the lab, so completely absorbed in her work. About the fire in her eyes when she'd pleaded with him. About how something in him had recognized something in her. A kindred spirit. Maybe, someone who understood sacrifice and duty and the weight of impossible choices. You did, he said simply. The shaft suddenly widened, opening into a small junction. Isla pulled herself up into it, then reached down to help Elias. Their hands clasped, and he felt the strength in her grip as she helped lever him up. They sat for a moment, catching their breath in the slightly larger space. We're close, Isla said, checking her facility schematic. Maybe 50 feet more. But when they looked up at the next section of shaft, their lights revealed twisted metal and debris. A collapse had partially blocked the path, leaving only a narrow gap at the top. I can fit through that, Isla said immediately. Barely. And if it shifts while you're in there, then you'll pull me out. Isla. She turned to him, her face serious in the harsh light of their helmet lamps. Elias. Trust me. Please. It was the first time she'd used his first name. Hearing it from her lips did something to him. Broke down some final wall he'd been maintaining. He cupped her face with his hand, his thumb brushing across her cheek. Be careful, he said, his voice low. Always am, she replied with a slight smile. Then she was moving, squeezing herself into the impossibly narrow gap. Elias watched her disappear into the darkness, his heart in his throat. He could hear her grunting with effort, the scrape of metal on metal. Then, suddenly, silence. Isla, he called. No response. Isla. A terrible grinding sound filled the shaft, and Elias realized with horror that the debris was shifting, the gap closing. Without thinking, he launched himself upward, his hand shooting through the narrowing space. His fingers found fabric, then flesh, and he pulled with everything he had. Isla came tumbling back through just as the gap collapsed completely with a deafening crash. They landed in a tangle of limbs, both breathing hard. Isla was on top of him, her face inches from his, her eyes wide with shock and adrenaline. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then, driven by something primal, something that had been building since the moment they'd met, Elias closed the distance and kissed her. Isla responded immediately, her hands fisting in his jacket, pulling him closer. The kiss was fierce, desperate, charged with all the fear and tension and connection of their impossible situation. When they finally broke apart, both were trembling. "We need to find another way," Elias said, his voice hoarse. Isla nodded, but her hand found his and squeezed. Together, they backtracked through the shaft, Isla leading them through a secondary route she remembered from the facility schematics. This path was longer, more circuitous, but it brought them finally to a maintenance access that opened, miraculously, onto the north platform. The shuttle was there, engines already running, its lights cutting through the toxic fog that had rolled in. Elias's co-pilot saw them emerge and started waving frantically. Through his comm, Elias could hear the desperation. "Captain, the platform is cracking. We need to go now." But as they ran toward the shuttle, Isla suddenly stopped. Elias, still holding her hand, was jerked to a halt. He turned to find her staring back at the facility, tears streaming down her face. "What is it?" he demanded. "The auxiliary lab," she said, her voice breaking. "I just realized there's a whole data set I didn't back up. The biological samples, the adaptive mutations. Without that, the rest is incomplete." Elias felt his blood run cold. "Where?" "Eastern Wing." "But that section," her voice cracked. "That section already collapsed." The relief that washed over Elias was immediate and shameful. The data was lost, but Isla was here, alive, and they could leave. He started pulling her toward the shuttle. "Then it's gone. We need to go." But Isla resisted, her feet planted. "You don't understand. Without those samples, I can't prove the mutation hypothesis. The data about the planetary core is useless without the biological component. I'd just be showing correlation, not causation. No one will listen, no one will believe." "I don't care," Elias said fiercely, spinning her to face him. "I don't care about the data or the samples or any of it. I care about getting you off this planet alive. But millions of lives are not worth yours. Not to me." The words hung between them, raw and honest. Isla's eyes searched his face, seeing something there that made her breath catch. Around them, Valthera was dying, the ground shaking, the sky on fire, the air itself becoming poison. "Captain," his co-pilot screamed through the comm, "the platform is giving way." Elias could see it. Massive cracks spreading across the landing pad, chunks of rockcrete already crumbling into the abyss below. They had seconds, not minutes. "Isla," he said, softer now, his hands gripping her shoulders. "Please, come with me. We'll find another way. We'll go back, warn people based on what you do have." "We'll wait," she interrupted, her eyes going wide. "Wait." The satellite array. The automated research station on Valthera's third moon. I uploaded continuous data streams there. The biological samples, everything. It was supposed to be a redundant backup, but I forgot. Hope surged through Elias. "Can we reach it?" "The shuttle's long-range comms can. We can retrieve everything remotely once we're off-planet." The platform gave another violent lurch. There was no more time for words. Elias grabbed Isla's hand and ran. They reached the shuttle just as the section of platform behind them fell away into darkness. Elias practically threw Isla through the airlock, following close behind. Before the door even finished sealing, his co-pilot was pulling them up and away from the dying planet. Through the viewport, they watched as the research facility, Isla's home for 3 years, crumbled and fell, swallowed by the planet's violent transformation. Isla's hand found Elias's again, holding tight as they watched. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "Don't be," she replied. "You saved my life. More importantly, you helped me save the work." She turned to him, her amber eyes bright with unshed tears, and something else, something that made his heart race. "You stayed when you didn't have to. You helped when you could have forced me out. You risked everything for me." "For the mission," he said, but even he didn't believe it. "Liar," she said softly, then kissed him again, this time tender and sweet and full of promise. Behind them, his co-pilot very deliberately cleared his throat. "Setting course for the orbital station. Should arrive in 6 hours." I'll just be up front, flying, doing pilot things. When they were alone in the shuttle's small passenger bay, surrounded by rescued data cores and emergency equipment, Isla pulled Elias down beside her. They sat close, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist, both of them filthy and exhausted and alive. What happens now? She asked. Elias thought about regulations, about protocols, about the paperwork nightmare that awaited them. Then he thought about how nothing had ever felt as right as this moment, and decided paperwork could wait. Now, he said, pressing a kiss to her temple. Now we retrieve your data from the satellite. Then we make sure the galaxy hears what you discovered. And then I take you on a proper date. One that doesn't involve near-death experiences or collapsing planets. Isla laughed, the sound making something warm bloom in his chest. Sounds boring. Probably will be. Good. I could use boring for a while. She lifted her head to look at him. But Elias? After boring, after we've shared this data and done our duty. Yes. Her smile was mischievous and bright. I know about 7 other planetary systems showing early warning signs. Someone's going to need to investigate them. Someone with experience in dangerous extractions. Elias groaned, but he was smiling. You're going to get me killed, aren't you? Probably, Isla agreed cheerfully. But think of all the lives we'll save. Together, he said, making it not a question but a promise. Together, she confirmed, and kissed him again as Valthera burned behind them, and the vast universe full of possibilities spread out before them. Epilogue. 6 months later, Isla Vance's research on planetary death cycles would revolutionize predictive models across the galaxy. 14 worlds were evacuated in time because of the data she'd risked everything to preserve. The satellite backup proved complete, providing the biological correlation she needed to prove her hypothesis. Captain Elias Reeve requested a transfer to long-term scientific mission support. Command approved it, probably because no one else wanted the job of protecting stubborn scientists in dangerous situations. And if anyone noticed that Captain Reeve and Dr. Vance were inseparable, that their mission reports often contained suspicious gaps in the timeline, or that they had a tendency to disappear into storage bays for equipment checks that lasted far longer than necessary, well, Command decided that some things were better left unquestioned. After all, they were saving lives. What they did in between was their own business.